Oh, Barbara, thank you so much for joining me today. And we want to discuss this vital work that you're doing with working with cancer. Before we kick off all of our discussions, can we start by understanding what started you on this mission and how you got to where we are today?
Yes, of course. And thank you so much, Sally, for inviting me to do this today. I'm delighted that we met. Yeah. So basically, I had a breast cancer diagnosis in 2005 in March, and went through the usual rigors of treatment. I had a stage 2 cancer. So I had 3 surgeries in 1 month, which was fun. And then it was a routine mammogram, by the way, that found it. And then I had about 4 months of chemotherapy and about 4 or 5 weeks of radiotherapy. So that was almost 20 years ago. But at the time, I was working as a human resources director in the city in a big investment management company. And although people were very nice to me, it was unbelievably tough getting back to work. I realize now, tell people what I should have done about the side effects I was experiencing. I tried to classically carry on as normal, which is not helpful, I discovered to my cost. And it was that experience that led me basically to kind of, first of all, I set up a campaign group, a little group in the city. We were all 4 HR directors who'd all been in a similar situation and found it tough managing work and cancer. So we kind of did a bit of work in the city trying to raise awareness. Then I got involved with the National Cancer Survivorship Initiative being run by the government and the Department of Health. Those were in the days where we had a cancer strategy. And it's really interesting seeing that Wes Streeting has just been talking about actually having a cancer strategy, because the whole thing was discontinued a few years ago. So I contributed to that, particularly around work and cancer. And it was about survivorship was a new issue on the agenda, interestingly. And then what was happening, I was sort of in between jobs where I was working, and I took up a coaching course, as you do, and discovered in the course of my coaching practice how amazingly effective coaching was in terms of helping people get back to work successfully. And so when I allegedly retired from work in 2012, I thought, I know I'd quite like to do something, not HR, but something that can use my coaching skills. So I actually then went to a place called the School for Social Entrepreneurs, recommended by a friend, and they basically helped me set up working with cancer as a social enterprise. And now, over the last 12 years or 10 years or so, because it became a company in 2014. So it's our birthday this year.
Happy birthday.
Which is wonderful. We have supported thousands of people through our coaching, training services and consultancy services, trying to raise awareness that managing work and cancer is really important, but most employers haven't got the knowledge, the experience, or the understanding to do that very well. Yeah. As a result of which, employers are in danger of losing a lot of great people from the workforce.
Oh, thank you, Barbara. It's so incredibly kind of you to share that story with me, but also with the thousands of people that you've already helped at working with cancer. And I think already there are so many standout sort of takeaways from what you've just said. On the one hand, a huge plea to everybody listening to this, whether you are female yourselves or whether you've got mothers, wives, sisters, etc. That routine mammogram was obviously very key. So yes. Please, can we all remember the importance? I think I'm hearing that sort of putting our cape on and coming back to work and going, I'll just keep quiet about all this stuff I'm experiencing, and I'll just put my superhero cape on, because we're trying to, carry on and keep calm and carry on. And I can completely resonate with that ethos. We'll come on to why sometimes we might feel the need to do that in a minute, I think. But I also hear this takeout for me around surviving. And I did a walk recently for the Shine Night walk, and I was delighted to hear the CEO of Breast Cancer Now talking about doubling survivor rates. That is fantastic news, and we should also be shouting about this. But what it does mean for me is that there's a lot more people working with cancer. So the need for you is huge. And so that is why we're on this call today, and why we're talking so much at Something Big about it. So what a great start to our conversation. I guess one of the things that I really want to touch on as well is stigma. We just talked a minute ago about that superhero cape. And it's clear to me that there's something going on here about the stigma of talking about cancer, whether that's at work or not. But what do you think is behind that stigma, and why you felt that need to come back and sort of pretend everything's fine?
I think it's almost a kind of a different question for every person that has cancer. But fundamentally, it's about fear and awkwardness. But I think fear, and particularly, I remember when I was a lot younger, people didn't even talk about cancer. They never mentioned it. They might mention the big C, but they may just, people died. And so there's still that kind of residual issue about the fear of cancer and impending death. But also there's something about, you must have done something wrong in your life, or in some ethnicities, a previous life, I have to say, to have this thing happen to you. So I think it varies amongst cultures. In the UK, it varies tremendously. In the city where I used to work in financial services, it was something that was an appalling did appalling damage to your career. So you never mentioned it, because otherwise people would probably try and get rid of you. Whereas in other, some other public sector organizations, it's probably a much better. So I think it does vary, but I think the overriding issue is fear of the unknown and what's going to happen to you and your life and your family's life because of cancer. And I think, and ignorance as well. That's the other big issue, is that people just do not understand cancer. Many people still think it's one illness. And of course, it's over 200 different illnesses. And you and I, Sally, could have the same breast cancer, for example, but we might even have the same treatment, medical treatment, but our physical and emotional reaction will be entirely different. And because of that, it's absolutely wrong to make assumptions, have expectations about what's going to happen. And I think because of that, that ignorance is very difficult to deal with, because the classic thing, I'll have a manager say, well, my mum had breast cancer, so I know what breast cancer's like. Well, no, you don't. And so the stigma is born of many things, but culturally, I think all countries have issues about coping with the impact of that diagnosis, and all people. And I don't think I've ever met any person who said, oh, I've got cancer. End of story.
Noting that obviously everybody's journey is different, their treatment might be different, their reaction, their response, their family support around them will be different and unique. If I put myself, if I can, in the shoes of someone who might be newly diagnosed, facing the prospect of ongoing treatment for a while now, and I'm in the workplace, how might I be feeling, and what advice could you give me for how I might make this work environment better for me?
Yeah, it's really tough because one of the first problems is as soon as you get a diagnosis, you stop hearing things. You actually are just intent on your own personal kind of headspace of what's going on here. And there may be a lot around, am I going to how much time have I got to live? I'm a natural catastrophist, okay? So I go to oh my God, will I be here for my son's birthday? For example. So there's a lot of grief and anger and despair and stuff going on. Coming back to so your head doesn't immediately go into work, although I do remember thinking, what benefits, can I, because they wanted to start my treatment immediately. So it was like, what benefits am I able to access? And I'm the head of HR, I'd forgotten, okay? It just shows what's going on in your head, which is confusion and emotion and upset and despair. People, the issue is that when you have your diagnosis, you'll be worried about, when you start thinking about work, you're worried about your job and your career and how you're going to manage. You're worried about, if like me, you're the main breadwinner, you're worried about money. Will we be able to keep paying the mortgage? If you're the main carer in your family, you'll be worried about what's happening with your dependents and whether you'll still be able to support them. So there'll be a lot of issues going around in your head around you personally, professionally, your family, your friends. Who do I tell? What do I tell? So I always say, once you've got a moment's kind of calm through that storm, it's important to let your boss know and your colleagues know, your close colleagues at least, and your family. And it's important to let people know at work, particularly your boss and HR, because you're protected under the legislation, under the Equality Act. So you need to let people know what's going on and understand your rights. You need time to consider your finances. HR may be able to help you with that. You need to understand your sick leave. If you've got any private health insurance, if you've got any critical illness insurance, what's how will we manage if I'm going to be in hospital for a while? You need to think about how you're going to tell your family, particularly your children, if you've got young children. That's very tough. And it's important to seek help from, charities, organisations like us, Breast Cancer Now, Maggie's, Macmillan, wherever you want to go. What I would say is don't be worried about asking for help. It doesn't mean you're a weak person if you need support. You may not feel at first you do need support. I mean, I do remember personally being really, really cross with everybody and everything because this wasn't meant to happen to me. I was supposed to sail through life and be very successful without any of this stuff happening. So sometimes people do need the opportunity to get through that anger, to get the support they need. And I think the best way is for, if we're talking about in a work context, if a manager can sit down with someone and say, tell me what's going on. I know you've told us you've got a cancer diagnosis. How are things? How can we help? These are what you're entitled to, by the way. This is how we can help you. But what more do you need? What else can we do?
I think
that's so important.
That's so great, Barbara, to hear all of that. And one of the real takeaways that I'm hearing is we do need to take that superhero cape off a little bit. And there's almost, I want to go as far as to say to work colleagues, to managers, we don't want to deprive them of the ability to support us. By not telling them, we might feel like we're protecting them or we're protecting ourselves, but actually we're also not enabling ourselves to ask for that help. And we're depriving those people around us. And obviously we can lean here on some of the dreadful stats that we see from the Working with Cancer pledge, that a third of employees are feeling isolated at work. And that is a two-way street. Yes, we need to increase awareness of how to support our colleagues when they're going through this difficult time, but also as an individual going through the hard time, we need to ask for that help, which I'm sure in itself is hard.
Yeah, it is. And I think one of the issues that we often find is that people will say, well, you know, they didn't say anything to me, or, you know, somebody avoided speaking to me. And sometimes, you know, it's really tough, but if you're the person with cancer, you actually have to take the initiative. You can't expect people to really understand what's going on. And the only way to get them to do that is by telling them.
It's talking.
It's
Communication.
really, yeah, it's really tough. You know, it's not easy to do, but we all lead busy lives. You know, we all know that situation where you go, you know, I remember you go back to work after cancer, somebody says, how are you? They're walking down the corridor, how are you? Before you've actually been able to say anything, they've walked past you.
Yeah.
Because it's a sort of a kind of a tick mechanism that we all go through. How are you? Fine. Okay. Next conversation.
Yeah. Well, so they're back at work, so they must be fine.
Exactly.
So I know that at Working with Cancer, you're really passionate about helping employees either remain in work or transition smoothly back into work. What are some of the most common challenges you hear from the thousands of people you've helped?
One of the most difficult things is just managing the side effects of treatment, because this is all about managing uncertainty, managing the unknown, as we say in many of our training programs to managers and to employees. Recovery from cancer isn't linear. So what I mean by that is if you kind of strain a wrist or break a leg, you know, with a bit of the right treatment, you know, you get a bit better every day, every week. You're realizing you're recovering. It might take a while, but you can kind of see a pattern of recovery. The problem with cancer treatment, and increasingly these days, people have things like continuing immunotherapy. They'll be on a variety of drugs to keep the cancer at bay. You can have periods when you feel like you could climb Mount Kilimanjaro and all the rest of it, and others when you can barely get out of bed. And and then there are all the emotional ups and downs that people are coping with as well. So typically, you know, you wake up one day, you've got a funny pain in your chest, you think, oh my God, it's come back. Okay, I better go and see a doctor. So it's managing the unknown. So if you're in your job, you know, there will be people who will have a whole variety, you know, fatigue, cognitive problems, mobility problems because of the drugs they're on, a variety of things. You're trying to do a busy job or apply for what is going to be a job you want to do because you're not in work, and you're coping with the unknown, and trying to kind of manage that can be really tough. And one of the things we often do is we give people coping strategies to cope with side effects, which are particularly, again, around conversations with colleagues and about what help you need, and how you can manage, you know, having a hot flush in the boardroom in front of 10 blokes, for example. Okay.
Yeah.
So all of that. So I think actually the biggest challenge is having the flexibility within your current job or the new job that you're applying for that will enable you to manage a difficult and uncertain situation. And that's asking a lot of your manager and your colleagues, as well as of yourself. I mean, it's a nightmare. I always say that as a manager, managing an employee with cancer is probably one of the most challenging things you can do. Yeah. Much more difficult than managing a redundancy, for example.
Well, it's the unknown, and I think you said it earlier on, it's not linear. People don't just go have surgery, have treatment, come back and they're all fine. There are, you know, ongoing ups and downs that we have to be prepared for. Interestingly, that flexibility and that arrangement and good communication between employer and employee is something that we are getting better at in other areas of the workplace. So we understand that parenting is not linear. We understand that mental health is not linear. So I think the big message here is, you know, cancer is not linear.
Exactly.
turning now from sort of employers to colleagues, one of the insights that kind of got me a little from the Working in Cancer with Cancer pledge was that employees with cancer are feeling so isolated at work, which feels like a real shame, because in other areas of diversity and inclusion and other areas, we've made huge strides, I feel, in peer-to-peer allyship. And I know from working with you in the last few months that some of the things that have been said to some of the people you've helped and yourselves, some of the things that a colleague might have said or not said were just a bit tone deaf, you know. So talk to us about how we can get better allyship from peer-to-peer colleagues.
Well, I think one of the issues here is that people just don't know what to say. So I think this is about learning how to talk about ill health in a kind of constructive way, not the kind of, you know, you'll be fine. Or the other classic one is, have you tried? Yeah. Which, have you tried, you know, which can be cannabis oil, apricot kernels was one I heard, from actually quite a senior manager in a wellbeing role, would you believe? So there's something about people not knowing how to talk about cancer. A lot of the work we do is about trying to give people the right words. What we will say is this is about organizations understanding how to help someone come back to work. So, for example, at the point of diagnosis, that's when all the proper conversation should begin, is how do you make sure that people understand what the person's going through, what their cancer is, what support they would need from colleagues. So we always say, let's try and get the manager or the individual to craft a message which says, you know, I'm unwell, I'm having treatment, I won't be in touch for a while, but I'll be back. I'm hoping to be back soon. I'm very happy for you guys to get in touch with me, and I'll be in touch with you when I can. And when I'm in touch with you, please don't tell me, please tell me about your life. Don't ask me too much about my cancer. I may not want to talk about it. So in other words, you're crafting messages at key stages, and particularly about a month before someone's planning to come back to work, you really need to do a lot of planning as the individual with cancer, but also as the manager. What's going to happen on day one? How are you going to greet that person and make them feel okay? What are people going to say? Are we all clear about what we should say and what we shouldn't say? So I think there's quite a lot of planning that needs to be done by the individual and by their managers to make sure that you don't get too many. You will get them, you know, too many of those, oh, where have you been? Have you been on holiday? You look really well moments, which do happen.
I think, I mean, obviously I'm very biased around communication and the power that communication, if it's planned and considered and well thought out and the language selection is right, you know, that makes the world of difference. But I really hear you on that kind of day one, on helping set the scene for people so that they know what to expect and what to do. I think we also have got slightly better in the workplace about people that are returning from maternity, for example. Yes. You know, someone coming back from maternity has been out of the business for a long time. They don't know if they can do their job very well because all they've been doing is, you know, changing nappies, and they feel like, oh gosh, am I going to be okay? And I do think that day one moment of making them feel it's okay, you know, we're here for you and we understand what you've just gone through. That makes a massive difference, doesn't it?
I'd say two things. One is that I've often had people say, you know, would it be okay? I'd love to go into the office and surprise them. What do you think about doing that? Now, I've had occasions where people have done that, quite a few, and they've turned up in the office unannounced, and they found somebody sitting at their desk. They found people thinking, why are they back? Is there a problem? It leads to people will often greet them sort of open mouthed. What are you doing here? So I always say no surprises.
Yeah.
I think the other issue is that you can't plan for everything. So, there is no, I wouldn't, don't beat yourself up because it's not, things aren't perfect. I would add one other thing. If somebody's coming back to work after they've been away a long time, I think the management group, or their individual manager and colleagues, should almost consider this as an induction.
Yes.
So you're actually, the person may have been away, in touch, hopefully a bit, but away from the office for months. There may be new people there. There may be new
Absolutely.
processes. They may be new systems. They'll have forgotten their computer password, possibly.
Yes.
In one
Yes.
case, I had a company that actually moved location and didn't actually tell the employee.
Oh gosh.
So it's, it's important, like as with maternity leave,
Yeah.
is you manage that process of reintegration.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
really, really important.
Yeah, I think two things there. No surprises. I think that's on both sides. I think that's a great one. And I think reboarding, this concept of, look, we're starting afresh, and we would plan for that. If we had a new joiner joining us today, we would plan. So if we have someone reboarding with us after a long time, they will have missed all sorts of things. Thank you. Brilliant. So, Barbara, one of the things I've heard you talk about at Working with Cancer is about changing the conversation about cancer. So, can you give me a sense of what we're changing it from and to?
Okay. So the classic one is, oh, that's really bad news, but you'll be fine. Or, oh, that's really bad news. I know someone who had that, and they were really ill. They died. So it's providing empathy. It's listening. It's asking open questions. It's encouraging people to talk, to look pleased when you see them rather than upset and putting on the look, the kind of what I call the cancer face. So create connection. You might want to say, I hear, I notice, I imagine. So, listening skills are absolutely essential, active listening. And I think offering support rather than solutions. As I said, as the kind of, have you tried? You don't want to be fixed. You just want someone who'll say, I can't imagine what you're going through. It must be so tough. Can I get you a cup of coffee? Why don't we have a chat and have a cup of coffee? That's the way to deal with it. So I think it's being an active listener, empathetic, and being understanding if that person occasionally lets you down. So, for example, if they've said, yes, I'll do that, I'll meet you on that day, or I'll get that piece of work done, whatever it is, if you can't do it, if that person can't do it, then be understanding. They're going through hell, and mistakes happen in that situation.
Yeah. Oh, I really hear all of that. And I think my takeaways are the cancer face. Let's ditch
Yes.
the cancer face. It's not helpful. Let's really dial up the active listening, because I think that active listening really helps pull you into the needs of that unique person and where they're at. I have supported various friends through this journey, and they've all dealt with it differently. Some use humor, some do not, and I think active listening helps us pull in to what is right for that person. And I also love this. I probably use this with my husband a little bit, but it's support over solutions. I am not wanting the answer. I'm not asking you to fix my problem, but I would love for your general help and support. So I think, have you tried this? Have you tried that? Those things are not helpful. No one's looking for the fix. They're looking for the are you on this journey with me, listening.
Yeah, I think it doesn't help, unfortunately, that very often you've had your treatment and you might be looking pretty well, either in the flesh, as it were, if you're working in the office or wherever it is you're working, or on a video. And people can look terrific and be really unwell. And because of that, and because we go on appearances, people will assume, they'll make an assumption that you're okay.
Yeah.
And so we always say, listen to what the person's saying. We have a kind of process where we'll say if you don't want to give people, if you're feeling really bad and you don't want to give people all the kind of grotty detail, you could at least use that kind of, how are you feeling out of 10? Give me so you could actually say, I'm actually having a 5 out of 10 day. Can we just leave it,
I think numbers and scoring is a very powerful way to describe, because if someone says they're 8, versus a 5, I think that gives you an instant ability to lean into the right kind of support. But I also love no assumptions. No assumptions. Yeah, great. One of the things I'm obviously really passionate about is communication, and I believe it really does have the power to overcome so many obstacles. If we just think about the workplace for a moment, and obviously be above and beyond the one-to-one conversations happening between colleagues and also between managers and employees, how can we help organizations on a large scale improve and foster better communication around this whole topic?
Okay, well, I think probably the first thing is to sign the Working with Cancer Pledge, which the campaign, which is about improving support for people in the workplace. I think it's not very often employers think that providing support for people, actually with any illness, not just cancer, is about providing, it's like a tick box. You provide private healthcare, you have an employee assistance program, you have occupational health, you might provide free GP appointments. But what you don't do is you don't provide the policies and practices in place that support people with cancer. So I think it's important, for example, that you have proper policies in place which aren't punitive to support people who have long-term health conditions like cancer, or it could be depression, or it could be cardiac problems or Parkinson's or whatever, but you need to have those in place. You need to have proper return to work policies. How do we manage a return to work in this organisation? What is the nature of our phased return? What counselling and coaching and other services do we have available for managers and employees to support that return to work? Because I think the one thing I would say employers miss in their benefits program is they're very good, often, not always, at providing private health and stuff while people are having treatment. But there's nothing that helps people to transition people back to work except occupational health advice, which is often just one-off bits of advice, which of course an employer doesn't actually have to follow. So I think that's really important. And I think the other thing is setting up networks within the organisation. There are already in many places maternity networks, menopause networks, but very rarely one for people with cancer. So I do believe that, and peer support can be immensely helpful. And frankly, many organisations have them. They don't actually provide a budget for them, but people have them anyway. But I think those kinds of things are really, really helpful. So having the right policies, training for managers, providing coaching and counselling, other things that help people transition from treatment back to work, and kind of support groups and support networks.
I love that, Barbara. So obviously sign the pledge. We will put that in the post that we've got here. But I think that the power of an ERG or a support group, etc., that is such a simple and cost-effective way for businesses to encourage shared knowledge and shared experience within their organizations, and so supportive.
Exactly.
And if you can go further and give it a budget to help people that need extra support, then even better.
Exactly.
And then the structure that sits in good foundations is the policies and the management training to support it. Brilliant. Great advice.
Thank you.
Working with cancer, when I first discovered you and I discovered the pledge, I was, astounded at the results of the pledge, but I also felt that it was so great that you were doing such great work, and I know you've helped thousands of organisations and employees through the work you do. So just tell me, what does Working with Cancer do?
Okay, so we are a social enterprise, a not-for-profit. We're not a charity, and my associates and I, by the way, all the people who work with me have either had cancer or a profound experience of cancer, as normally as a working carer. And we provide one-to-one coaching support, we provide training, and we provide consultancy to employers and to employees with cancer. And they may have any form of cancer at any stage. So we support people right up through to terminal illness. And we work throughout the UK and in Europe and in the US.
Fantastic. And helping so many people make this journey, which is tough enough and brutal enough as it is, a whole lot better with your support. Thank you so much for the great work you're doing.
My pleasure.